Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen is one of my favorite RPGs of all time, so naturally, when a new Dragon's Dogma game was announced, I was over the moon. This game isn't for everyone, especially if you're used to a lot of hand holding and the game telling you exactly what needs to be done. You need a lot of patience for this game to figure things out. If you have already played Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't going to feel much different. It's pretty much a more polished version with a new story. I think their goal wasn't innovation, it was just to improve their original concepts. I personally don't mind this because I always felt the first game was way ahead of its time and really wish more people had played it. This game isn't perfect by any means. It has its issues that I will definitely cover in this video. Now, before I talk about the actual game, let's talk about the early negative reviews. It's no secret that Dragon's Dogma 2 has subpar optimization. It is a CPU intensive game. I personally didn't face any issues except some stuttering when I entered populated cities. Everything was perfect while exploring outside the cities though. But again, I do have a very good PC. Hopefully they fix this so more people can enjoy this game. A patch was recently released, but I'm not quite sure how much that has helped the poor FPS. Now, this is what got the game the most negative reviews, the microtransactions. Capcom has always done microtransactions for all their games. While I do agree microtransactions shouldn't exist in games, especially such expensive ones, the whole discourse around the microtransactions was overblown. Every single item sold under the microtransactions is available in the game. It's completely optional to buy them. A lot of people spread lies saying that the fast travel is locked behind a paywall, but it really isn't. You can just buy one additional port crystal. Literally nothing is behind a paywall. Dragon Dogma 2's story is not a continuation. It's set in a parallel universe. The setting of the game is interesting. You have two regions where the game's events take place: Vermont, the human kingdom, and Bathal, home of the Beastons. Though it does have the core plot of the first game where a dragon has stolen your heart, marking you as an arisen, and it is your destiny to go find and kill the dragon or die trying, in Dragon's Dogma 2, the arisen is also destined to rule over the kingdom of Vermont. However, an imposter is sitting on the throne, so apart from hunting down the dragon, you must also expose the fraud. I was personally slightly disappointed in the storytelling. The lore of Dragon's Dogma is amazing, but sadly, it isn't presented well. While I understand that the exploration is the selling point of this game, I wish they utilized all the characters better. A lot of characters they showed in the trailer seem to be extremely important, but in the actual game, they barely had any screen time. The main story felt rushed and half done. At the end of the day, the way I interpret this is that the story is about the Arisen and the dragon. Everything in between never mattered in the grand scheme of things, but that doesn't explain the huge wasted opportunity with many of the plot lines. When it comes to the quest, there's very little hand-holding, and you'll miss out on a lot of quests if you rush the main story and don't explore. I wasn't the biggest fan of the quest design either. A lot of time-sensitive quests, so be careful. The character creation is one of the best ever. The amount of details you can customize is insane. You can choose to be a human or a beaston. And like the previous game, your character's build does matter in terms of how much weight they carry or how much stamina they use, but it's not as impactful as it was in the first game. The basic progression system is pretty straightforward. As you gain experience and level up, your stats will increase. The vocation you are will slightly determine how your stats are increased though. This is why it's worth to keep switching your vocations. As for the vocations, you have 4 starter vocations: Fighter, Archer, Mage, and Thief. Through a quest, you unlock 2 more: Warrior and Sorcerer. And then you can also get 4 more that are exclusive to the Arisen: Trickster, Mystic Spearhand, Magic Archer, and my favorite, Warfarer. Warfarer basically lets you multiclass. It's amazing. Each vocation has their own unique skills and augments. Going in detail about each vocation would be a whole video on its own, so let me know if you want that. Each vocation has its own set of gear and weapons available. Armor is hugely simplified compared to the first game. Not the biggest fan because the previous allowed for amazing fashion, and of course fashion is the most important part of an RPG. Upgrading your gear and weapon is interesting though. What city you choose to enhance your weapons in has an impact on what boosts you get. Now if there is an arisen, there has to be a pawn. Pawns are your AI companions. You can customize your main pawn in detail too and give them their own vocation. They will also level up as you do, and of course also assign them an inclination which will dictate how they behave during combat and exploration. You can also hire 2 additional pawns from the Riftstone. These don't level with you, so make sure you constantly switch them out. Pawns will learn from your behavior. Rented pawns can help out with certain things too, Like if they've already done a quest with their arisen, they'll guide you to it. If there's any secret treasure somewhere, they'll show it to you. The same way your main pawn can be rented by other people too and pick up on whatever they learned and they'll tell you about it. This is a huge tip, but also a slight spoiler, so feel free to skip it. There's a mechanic called the Dragon's Plague. You will get an in-game pop-up warning you whenever a pawn is affected. It is a contagious condition that infects pawns as they travel between the worlds via the Riftstone.
"'Tis about time we pressed on, wouldn't you say, Master?"
Excuse me?
Pay attention to your pawns. Should they start behaving unpredictable and weird and have glowing eyes, kill them immediately. Throw them in the water, you can go to a Riftstone and get your main pawn back. If it's a rented pawn, send them back. You do not want to deal with what happens if Dragon's Plague is left unchecked. Exploring in Dragon's Dogma 2 is a genuine adventure. The world is so immersive. In cities, you have all sorts of NPCs. Since this game does have an affinity system, you can give them gifts and improve your relationship with them. Talk to them. You never know who might just give you a quest. The Vermont area is all grassy with forests and mountains, whereas Batal is a rocky desert. You're free to explore however you want, and I highly suggest you do. You may just randomly stumble upon very interesting places. Be prepared to be ambushed by monsters though. The world is dynamic and unpredictable. And also, like the previous game, Dragon's Dogma 2 also has a great day and night cycle. The nights are terrifying, and without your lantern, you won't be able to see anything. It can get a bit tedious walking everywhere, but for me, that's the real fun. Fast travel does exist in the game in the form of port crystals. There are a few permanent ones, but you do find portable port crystals that you can place wherever you want. Port crystals do require a ferry stone. They're consumable, so only use them in emergencies. You also have ox carts available to travel between cities. Now remember how I said the world is dynamic? Well, ox carts can also get ambushed by monsters. So be prepared for a fight always. Speaking of monsters, the variety is decent even though it was missing some amazing monsters from the previous game. It's always fun fighting drakes, griffins, chimeras and whatnot. But it's a little annoying when you're fighting an angry ogre while being surrounded by 5 swords and keep getting stun locked. That's what you get for being out in the wilderness, I suppose. The combat is pretty much the same from the previous game, which isn't a bad thing because the combat was always great because of all the different vocations available. How you set your pawn party will also have a huge role in how combat plays out. I've always really enjoyed the combat in Dragon's Dogma. Exploit weak spots and elemental weakness and you're good. You can even use the environment to your advantage and throw smaller enemies off the cliff. After your vocations are upgraded, combat becomes a breeze. And with the amount of exploring you will end up doing, it won't take long. Your biggest enemy while fighting big monsters is going to be the camera angle for sure. Without spoiling much, there is a true ending. It involves you entering the unmoored world. All I'm going to say about this is that it is time sensitive, and if you die, you will have to start from the very beginning of the unmoored world. A lot of people complained about it, but I liked this because it gave a really great sense of urgency. I enjoyed my time with Dragon's Dogma 2. They took the original game and improved it, but sadly also repeated the same mistakes. My biggest issue with the game was the execution of the story, which I hope they improve next time. Even though it is flawed, it is still amazing and I highly recommend it. There really is no other game like Dragon's Dogma. Hopefully we get a DLC soon. I don't know what Itsuno is going to come up with next, but I do know it's going to be an adventure. Oh, and also I have a beginner's tip video. I will put the link in the description in case you're interested.